Welcome to the Fit Rich Life podcast, a show where we talk about money, career, entrepreneurship, fitness, and building a life you absolutely love. At some point in your life journey, you will likely hit a point where you've achieved external success, a great career, a house, marriage, and more, yet you still feel empty inside. In today's special guest episode, I chat with Gary Batara, the author of the new book, Lessons to Inspire: Practical Advice from Successful People. It's a book where Gary shares insight he's gained from 5,000 hours of learning and study from a diverse set of well-known thought leaders of the modern age. But it's also a story about how Gary crossed the chasm of external success to achieve inner fulfillment and become the husband, father, brother, son, colleague, and friend he always aspired to be. Gary is the vice president of a Y Combinator Top 100 company. He has built a multiple six-figure marketing consultancy, achieved millionaire status, and competes at the national level for Olympic weightlifting. In this episode, here are some things you will learn about. 1. How to write a book and get it published. 2. The paradox of happiness and fulfillment. 3. Building a skill stack through your 9-to-5 job so that you can start your own business. 4. Using fitness as fuel for other buckets of life. 5. The key to having a great marriage, and a whole lot more. This is a great show for anyone interested in achieving success in one's career, along with building a life you're truly proud of, one that includes personal fulfillment and becoming a great person who blesses others. The insight, strategies, and wisdom that Gary shares will empower you on your journey to building a truly great life. Please enjoy a wide-ranging conversation with Gary Batara, the author of the new book, Lessons to Inspire. Gary Batara, great to have you on the show, brother. Thanks for coming.
It's good to see you.
Awesome. So for the audience who's tuning in, we got Gary Batara, author of Lessons to Inspire: Practical Advice from Successful People. Gary is vice president of marketing of a Y Combinator Top 100 company. He's built a multiple six-figure marketing consultancy. He, in his free time, likes to do competitive Olympic weightlifting and a whole lot more. And in this show, we're going to dive into his book, career development, money making, mindset, fitness, and a whole lot more. But before we dive into all of that, Gary, tell us about a pivotal moment in your life.
Yeah, I remember this one, I think, pretty clearly. It was about 2017, 2018. I used to work in the city, and I was driving home, and I just really absolutely hated myself. I wasn't a great husband, wasn't a great father, wasn't a great, like, literally anything. But I was actually doing pretty good at work. I just hated everything, though. And I was driving home, and this is crazy. I just started hitting the gas a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And, coming from San Francisco, you're going through the tunnel, right? And there's always cars, there's always police, something. That particular night, there was nothing. And I just started speeding and going further and further. And it wasn't like I was trying to kill myself. I just didn't care what happened. And I was driving fast and made it all the way from one end of the Bay Bridge to the other with, like, not a scratch, not nothing, not finding a cop, not finding another car, just as fast as I could going down there. And I just was like, oh man, like, what happened? Like, I'm so lucky, right? And then I went to go play some music, and I opened up the YouTube app, and for the first time ever, it was like a Tony Robbins recommendation. And he was like, "You're a loser." And I was like, "I am a loser, Tony Robbins." And he's like, "But you can be better." And I was like, "I'm listening." And that was it. And from that day, I just started diving into this whole world of self-development and being like, maybe I'm the problem, And that was such a profound thing for me to really think, oh, it's not everyone around me. This is just me. Like, I'm the source for everything. And yeah, I'll never forget that night.
I love it. Yeah, I think, I experienced a similar thing in my life where I used to play the victim card. Like, it's everyone else. It's all the life situations. It's work. It's what my parents did or did not teach me. what school did or did not teach me, and like I wasn't the problem, like everything else was the problem. So it sounds like that was, really the beginning of you taking 100% responsibility for yourself in your life.
Yeah, man. And I think, I've said this before, and it hurts to kind of say it like out loud, but I was like, I was the king of resentment, man. Like, you know, something was happening in my relationship, resentment, right? It's them. Something was happening great in my career, like I got a bad boss, like something, wasn't working out for me. I didn't see fitness results. I was like, it's the gym. It's got to be that, and it becomes a skill. Like it really is a skill to see things in such a distorted view. And I think when you start going into this world of self-development and discovery, I started to say, all right, well, I really firmly believe this. I'm going to read something and I'm just curious to see what this person says. And I think that that's a journey you can only take by yourself. Like no one likes to be told like you're wrong and this is a really bad point of view in public, or hell, even face to face. But it's different when you're reading it in a book, because it's like as if this person is just talking to you in private, being like, look, what you're doing is a bad thing, right? And then it's almost like this, like you have a safe space to say, okay, maybe I did have a really bad belief. And once you start, there's no turning back, because it's all connected, right? Like I have this one belief, and this belief drives this belief, which drives this, which drives this. It's like this web. So the second you start deciding that, well, one belief is broken, they all start to become in question. And I think that's what made, even like going back to the book for a second, writing, or going this deep into reading and self-development and philosophy and business was like, damn, well, if I now know that to be true, what's the next thing that supports that belief? And it's like you're really just, not just reinventing another person, like you're shedding this skin of who you were.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm curious, what was the original inspiration for the book? Like what made you, want to write this, and like kind of walk us through the genesis of the book?
Yeah. So basically, I had consumed what I quantify across 3 years, um, about 5,000 hours of self development, philosophy, business, marketing, you name it. And at some point, it's kind of like a sponge or like a bucket that's overflowing. And so the more I kept learning, the more I was like just in this zone and world by myself. And I just felt that at some point, like, man, like it's overflowing and I need to just actually get it out of my system, because it was one thing to just kind of consume it all, but it felt super strange to actually apply it. Right? It was like, oh, well, I have this really healthy mindset. Let me be a better husband or better father, whatever. And you're like, this kind of feels awkward when I'm actually attempting to do it. So when I started to be able to say, let me actually articulate my thoughts back in a way that I understand why this is so important, or why the life lesson is so important, I just started writing. Like one thing I learned, and this is exactly how it started. I wrote one quote that I heard from Tony Robbins. He was the first person I wrote about. And then how I was absolutely like not living that really helpful piece of advice. And then later, how I remedied it. And that was basically the format. I started writing, and over the course of 12 months, which was the time frame I wrote this, I wrote about 150 excerpts. And me writing it was almost me, inscribing it on my soul. It was, as I write it, it affirms like this is not just something I read or listened to, like this is me giving me advice almost.
I love
And
that.
yeah.
So took about 12 months to kind of like put all of this together. And I remember, because you and I have been friends for a long time, we worked at the same top 100 Y Combinator company. And I remember you telling me that, like, hey, I wrote this book. And when you first kind of told me about it, you're like, yeah, I hope one day I might get it published. I'm not really sure. So what was kind of like the trigger to like get you to actually go out and get this published?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I would heavily say you're a huge part of that, because this is a story I never really told you. Back when we were working together, you were doing an interview with Jonathan Fields. right? Like the author of Spark Type, like super famous, right? Like self-development guru, right? Um, I was on the marketing side. And after we had finished that discussion, I was talking to Jonathan. And at that time, I had just finished, like, that was just the completion of 12 months. And I was telling him about, I was like, hey, I realize I'm probably nobody in your world. I'm probably like just like the, marketing AV guy at this point for you. But I wrote something and we started talking. And at the end of it, he was like, you know what? I'm going to introduce you to my publishing agent. And, here's his personal email. Go ahead and write him a note and say Jonathan sent you, kind of thing. And I was like, is that how it works? And he got me in touch. And this guy, his name is David Moldemore. He ended up being the publishing agent for like Richard Branson. He was the publishing agent for James Clear Atomic Habits. Like he worked with James Clear to say, here's how you should format your book. Anyhow, I get in touch with him, and he was the one who had said, and it was kind of humbling. He was like, okay, well, there's hundreds of books out there that are about self-development and all that. And like, really, man, like you're nobody. Like you're just like another dude in the Bay Area that has a regular old job, regular old life. Why should I listen to you? And I was like, this sucks. This is the worst decision ever. Calling this guy, right? I was like, fuck Jonathan. This is the worst advice I've ever gotten, right? But I told him, I was like, well, just hear me out. I have checked every social standard that most millennials need, right? Like you got a good job, you bought a house, you're married, you have kids, all that stuff, right? But I was still unhappy. And now I'm in kind of a weird limbo where like no one talks about this stage, right? Like it's taboo to talk about how your life is all fucked up when you're supposed to be successful and having it all together, right? And anyhow, I said, I'm opening up my story, and we're the biggest demographic, millennials, in the nation right now, above boomers, above Gen Xers. I was like, so if any of us grew up in the same time period, even though we're different, we have shared experiences. And I said, I wrote about each one of those experiences. And I think that, certainly from a marketing standpoint, it's what we do all the time. We storytell. And that's a real phenomenon called like neural coupling. I can't just tell you like, hey, Justin, go eat healthy because it's good for you. Like, but if I tell you a story about how I was eating unhealthy and how eating healthy was much better for me, you identify yourself in that story and therefore have a unique way that you can get that message. And so he advised me. He was like, the way you're writing it, it needs to have this structure. Again, quote how you weren't living it and how you remedied it, and make it easy for the reader. And if you do that, then you might have something worthwhile. And he told me something I'll never forget too. He said, write as if no one is ever going to read it. I was like, ooh, that kind of is scary though. Like, what if I write something that I don't want someone to read? He's like, that's the point. He's like, just like marketing, man, like be authentic, say something that's worth listening to. And that was pretty scary. And that whole, again, how this got to this point of getting, published was putting all that on paper, putting it into that framework. And I was lucky enough to get like two really, successful writers and authors in their own right to kind of give me that guidance. And at some point, I think I was like my third call with him. He was like, I'm not your agent, right? And I was like, oh, I thought we're cool now at this point. I could just continue. He's like, no, I don't work for you. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you for your help. And that's it. But it's interesting. I will actually send him a copy of the book to just be like, hey, thank you. This is the outcome.
That's pretty incredible. And it's so fascinating to me, kind of the intertwining even of our stories. So, I dreamed of having a podcast for years. And, when you and I were at the company, the Y Combinator company, like you and I talked multiple times about me starting a podcast for the company.
Yeah.
And, part of like me getting to that point was getting in touch with Jonathan Fields, and interviewing him in front of, hundreds of people on a live webinar about, the Sparketype. And, the Sparketype, for the audience who's unfamiliar with it, is it's identifying the type of work that makes you come alive or feel alive. Mm-hmm. And so, as a well-being company, we were trying to, empower employees to really, identify that type of work that makes them come alive. And then, ultimately Jonathan Fields became podcast number 2
I know, it's
of
crazy.
this podcast. It used to formerly Fit Rich Life used to be called Alchemize Life, but it was the second podcast recording that I ever released. And like Jonathan helped me so much because if you go back and listen to that interview, I have like a shitty mic, a shitty camera, and like the sound quality on my side is so bad. And after that interview, similar to what you did, I was talking to him and I was like, "Hey man, what camera do you use? What mic do you use?" And he was like, "Oh, I'll send you an email with everything I use." And then, that empowered me to level up my podcasting game and, really bring that dream alive. And ultimately I decided to, just focus on doing my own podcast. But it's just, I love kind of how we both had a dream. Like you had a dream of publishing a book. I had a dream of, creating a podcast. And it's like this, like one pivotal,
Oh yeah, like,
person at that we brought in to help with the marketing of our company literally changed the trajectory of our life. And I
yeah,
think it's like really incredible. And that's one of my greatest joys of this podcast is being able to connect with people like Jonathan Fields and people like you who, brought a dream alive. And, I said before we hit record, there's a lot of people who want to write and publish a book, and, revealing kind of like how, you know, how that actually came about, I think is really empowering. So tell us a little bit more, about the publishing process. So basically you got in touch with, Jonathan Fields, agent, but then he was like, "I'm not your agent." So where did you go from there?
yeah. So let me actually start with if there's anyone out there who's attempting to write a book, like I don't know what's worse, like eating clean or writing a book. They're both pretty fucking painful. You know what I mean? Like, and I would say writing a book is probably worse because I did the math, right? I said, okay, if I'm going to write a legitimate book and I want it to be published, what are the basic criteria I need to even be taken seriously? And a adult novel is written at like a seventh or eighth grade like reading level and usually has about 70,000 words minimum. I was like, okay, 70,000 words, that sounds doable. Until I realized like how many words is in a sentence. It was like 10. I was like, ooh, this is gonna take some time. And so at that point, I already had like maybe like one or two excerpts, and they were like maybe 1,000 words. I was like, okay, 1,000 words is too long, and that took maybe 2 or 3 hours to write. So I just did the backwards math. How many days will it take for me to write, 500 to 700 words? Um, how many days will it take to get to 70,000? And when I did the math, 500 seemed to be a pretty normal like excerpt in general when I was doing like Google searches, like, what's an easy read? People like 500 to 700 words at a time. And when I did the math, it ended up being roughly 3 to 4 days a week for 1 year. I will have written roughly 70 to 75,000 words, and that's like pre-introduction and bibliography and all that kind of stuff. And so um, you have to actually schedule it and write it. So like when you're writing something at first, it's easy because you're like, oh, I'm super inspired, right? So you're going at it, and you're like, oh, this is gonna be cake. All I gotta do this is like 200 more times, right? But I guarantee you, like by the third time, you're like, oh, fuck it, this is stupid. This is dumb. I don't have any inspiration. I don't know what the hell I'm saying. And this is like before Chat GPT. This is before Write Sonic, before a lot of this AI that can support. Like, if I had to write the book now, I could probably write it like in 6 months, just with AI alone. But at the time, there was none of that. It was just like, uh, what do you call spell checking? That's like the only thing that existed. So um, when you're writing, you really have to put it into a framework. And just like eating clean or just like working out, you have to set up a specific time and day and actually the environment too. Like it's really, really important. Like you can't say, okay, well, I have 2 hours. I'm going to be on a train, so I'm just going to write. Like it doesn't work like that. You have to give yourself the right space, and it was everything. It was like, and that also was another reason to wake up early before anybody was awake, before the family was awake, before the kids, before the workout, anything. It was like putting yourself in the right environment to write, setting aside time every single day to write. And then here's the thing, start writing. And it kind of works like this. The first like couple dozen words or maybe even first paragraph or so is trash. always. It's always like some level of like, this is stupid, this is crappy, I'm trying to articulate my thoughts, and this sounds dumb. And then you like go through this cycle of like, at least for me, it was like anger and depression and like, embarrassment, right? But the more you write, it at some point it's kind of like a faucet waiting to get from cold to hot, right? Like at some point you turn on, at some point it just starts, and then you capitalize on that. And the reason for me, I had to write for roughly 45 minutes to an hour every, like during these times. I found that was as much bandwidth I had before my brain just like turned to scrambled eggs. And so that was the formula, right? Like picking out, creating essentially a production schedule and sticking to that and saying, no matter what, if I feel like it or not, I'm going to write. And more often than not, you're going to have these times when you don't want to write and you have to write anyway. And it's not about having it be perfect. It's just getting it out there, because at some point, every single time you will cross this chasm and you will start having something, something that you could be proud of writing. But the consistency piece is really important, because I think at one point I missed one day, and just even that changed the whole trajectory. Like I couldn't think the same. I wasn't typing as fast. It's just, so consistency, and then giving yourself the right environment and having a specific time frame. And that's why I think the book has such rich insight into it, because, if I was writing it for 5 years, I would have evolved already from writing in year 1 to year 5. But because it was all written in this condensed time frame, I think it really captures like the essence of that, moment of growth. And I think you can, hear it in the book. But that's the writing part. And then the publication part is a whole nother story. Like I thought, nice, I'm done. Okay.
Let me pause 1 minute before we go into the publication
Yeah.
process, because there's some really good gold in here. So one of the things, so I write a newsletter, usually 3 to 4 times a month, and it's the same exact thing for me. I have to write first thing in the morning, basically before my workout, before my wife wakes up. Otherwise, like it just will not happen. And it's I really feel like writing is mental bodybuilding. And just like with a great workout, the first, 5 to 20 minutes of the workout suck because your body's still like warming up. And
Yeah.
you're like, maybe you do some lighter weight to kind of like work into some working reps, or maybe you like walk on the treadmill for 5 to 10 minutes, do some foam rolling, but you kind of like ease your body into a powerful workout. Whereas I feel like it's very similar with writing. Like you kind of have to have those like first warm up reps and sets of like
Yeah.
writing complete garbage before you start to like, okay, now this is powerful writing. And like same thing in the workout, like, 10, 20 minutes in, you're like, now this is a powerful workout. But the first like 5 to 20 minutes of writing or working out it's like trash. But you
Yeah.
have to move through that period before you can get to the powerful period.
Yeah. And I bet you, and I bet you feel the same thing. It feels just like a workout when you're done. Like there is an endorphin rush that comes when you're done writing. Like it's not just accomplishment. It's like relief. Because one of the things I really liked that I had learned about my, kind of mindset in general is our thoughts are chaotic, right? But when you write it down, it puts your thoughts in order, in sequential order. It helps put them down into like, here's kind of a fact and here's kind of the claims behind it. And it makes you realize, okay, well, these are my thoughts on paper. That wasn't so crazy. Or, well, hold on a second. That actually was really a bad idea. Or maybe I was seeing things incorrectly. So, but yeah, the writing piece, man, like it's such I like the way you describe it, like mental bodybuilding.
Yeah, 100%. And it's I totally agree with you. Like when you write, it forces you to take the chaos of your thoughts
Mhm.
and put it into an order where you could like share that writing with someone else and it would make sense. Whereas if like you just like tried to like blurt it out, you might kind of capture the essence, but it's so jumbled all over. Whereas the process of writing, it hones your thoughts, it crystallizes your ideas into like a consumable form that is like uh appetizing to others. And just like you said earlier, like after the workout, you're like, oh, I feel so good. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing for me. Even if I just write for 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, I'm just like, hell yeah, like I created something. And like that process of creation, even though it's really hard to get started, just like a workout can be really hard to get started, when you finish, just like most people never say like after a workout, like, oh, like I wish I didn't do that workout.
Yeah. That's so true.
99% of the time, they're like, hell yeah, it was hard to start, but I'm so glad I did that workout. And it's the same thing with writing. It's like, it's hard in the beginning, but when you finish, you just feel so good. And that ties back to your mention of Tony Robbins kind of being the first person that you talked about. And the quote that you led with in the book is progress equals happiness. And that's the type of progress you feel after you finish a workout. That's the type of progress or happiness that you feel from progress after you finish like a writing session or a workout. So I think that's super super powerful.
Yeah, 100%, man, 100%.
Okay, tell us about the actual publication process now.
In one word, humbling. All right. So, I have this manuscript. At this point, it was probably something like 300 pages or something like that, and it was like, when I say raw, like for me, I was like, I did it. For somebody looking at it, it was just like a jumble of fucking words on paper, right? It was like, dude, what the hell do I do with this? It was like a bag of trash, right? Because the first publishing house I went to was like Penguin Random House, right? I was like, oh, they'll totally get back to me, right? It was like all New York Times bestsellers, all that, and it's like not even nothing. Like it explicitly says, do not ever send us something unless it has this criteria. And I was like, fuck, I should have read this in advance. Right? And it was like, if it's too many words, if it has this topic, because I didn't know, like I thought these guys are just kind of, like waiting for new books, right? But they're like, I'm a business. I'm looking for these books because I need more, to kind of fill the shelves with more books like this. These are the topics that are relevant. This is the format that we want it to be in. This is the number of words, the sentiment. Like I didn't know anything about this. So I was like, oh crap, I did it backwards. I have something that's written and now it doesn't fit into this hole. And I went down the list, like Penguin Random House to like a number of others. And midway through, one publishing company actually got back to me. I can't remember the name, but it was like for sure one of the top 10. They got back to me and had said just one thing. They were like, you need to fix A, B, and C. And it was even the formatting of how I submitted the manuscript. They were like, dude, it's just literally one run-on sentence for what they saw. I was like, I know, but aren't you supposed to like, get it ready for like book legibility? And they were like, no, you do all the formatting yourself. Um, and then I started to like have a conversation back and forth via email, and then surprisingly, they never got back to me. But all of that was really helpful because I was like, damn, I really got to format this thing. And what it teaches you is how much you've done step one, which is getting it all out of your head. Now it's getting it ready for somebody to actually review, right? It's like doing a presentation for work. It's like, okay, well, I'm competent. I know all this stuff. And your boss asks you to like tell you about it. And all of a sudden you blurt out a bunch of notes. You're like, no, I have to put it into a presentation. I have to kind of get the bullet points. I have to know what the outcome is going to be. And I just didn't think that it was supposed to work like that. I thought they just take your raw work and like give you a parade. And they're like, here's a publishing contract. And it just didn't work like that. So what you have to do is you have to think about what genre of book you're actually writing. Now for me, I knew it was self-development, but they also looked at it, I think, as actually it was called personal growth. So you also have to like really look at if I had to give advice to anybody wanting to get published, and let's say you already wrote something, look up the different publishing houses, because the different publishing houses have different things that they're looking for. And not all publishing houses will print your stuff. It's not like, they're all made equal. Like some do this, some do that. And they're also looking for specific formats for it to be in, whether it's going to be, fully nonfiction, or if it's going to have like my book where it has quotes from other authors. Like you have to go through the diligence process to make sure that everything is legal, right? So a lot of them have you do all the work, and it's important because that whole extra set of work is at least another year because there could be all kinds of things you have to fix with your manuscript, and that's just before they accept the submission. And because they get, I think it's something like hundreds of thousands of inquiries regularly, they're like, I need the one pager overview of what your book's about. And I was like, I can call you and tell you about it. And they're like, no, man, it has to be in this format. Give us a synopsis, give us what the takeaway is. And it's just all these things that, like, again, what you write is just, that's the core. And then you have to have all these other assets that you have to create so you can actually pitch your book properly. So author or publisher number 29, Atticus Books, they do a lot of like health and medicine. And there's other publishing companies out there that are a bit friendlier to first time authors. And same thing, they're also looking for specific genres to appeal to, as well as they also look at you as an author. They're like, are you sellable? Like, I keep thinking that these folks are like out there just trying to change the world. It's a business for them, so they're looking for you. They can take your book and they can monetize it. They're looking for you because you fill a gap for their portfolio. And all that stuff I didn't know. So if you're writing a book, I don't care if you're 1 page into it or 1,000 pages into it, look up who you want to publish your book. Now, I don't know much about the self-publishing space, but if you want to publish it, this is the kind of, path. And just to give scope for everybody, writing it took about a year. Going through the publication process just to bid it was at least another year. And then after that, once it is picked up, which, what they do is they give you a contract and, they're telling you, here's the royalties you're going to get for this book. And here's what we're going to do to launch it, yada, yada, yada. Then they start the process, which took another year of going through, and you're working now with the typesetters, the editors, the proofreaders, the copywriters. And this is crazy. It sounds funny, but they actually read the book like line by line. They're like, hey, chapter 1, page 6. What did you mean when you said this? And I was like, I don't know. Can't you guys just like, do your thing? And they're like, no, we need to know what you're trying to say because we can't rewrite this. Like we need, and I did not know it was that involved. Like they go back and they're really meticulous about what's the message. They're like, well, why say it in 20 words, Gary, if you can say it in 10? And I was like, because it's cool, baby. And they're like, no, that's not good. We're making this not for you, for the reader. And that was just humbling because you're like, man, I did the work. I wrote at 3:00 in the morning. Like I did all that. And like, that's great. But now we're going to make it, legible. So that whole process from writing the book year 1, going to publishers year 2, and then going into the editing process, which took about a year or so, it takes some time.
Yeah, that's a huge, you're talking 2 to 3 years or 2.5 to 3 years minimum to get something out in the world, which I think is a huge undertaking. So I'm just wondering, you talk a lot, in the book about taking responsibility and goal setting and, discipline. What are how did you stick with this over like a 3-year period? Like, were there moments where you're like, I'm just going to give up? And then if so, like, how did you get back on the horse?
Pretty much every day I wake up in the morning and be like, you're a fucking fraud. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I looked at. Like, I was brushing my teeth in the morning being like, this isn't you. And that's exactly what it feels like, right? It's like, I'm not the person I think I am in my head because I don't have those results, but it's all in my head now. And it takes time to become that person. And I think for me, it was more like, carrot and stick. It was more stick. Like, I knew if I didn't do this, I knew the outcome of my life. I knew I was being a crappy husband, father, brother, son, friend, everything. And I knew that took me to the place of speeding down a bridge, not caring about my life, right? And feeling empty and gross. And every day that I did this work, I just generally not just felt better, but like I was proud of myself. because it was doing hard stuff. It was like, all right, well, I could fight with my spouse or I could yell at my kids, but I'm not going to. I'm going to look in the mirror and see what I can do to fix that. And that level of responsibility, it's painful, man, but what I found was, this sounds crazy. Like, I used to search for happiness all the time myself, just only self gratification. And when I started to do more of this work, the difficulty of not just writing, but daily mindfulness of being a better human, like not being snaky to people, like exercise, the whole nine. I wasn't necessarily happy all the time, but every night I was super fulfilled. And that feeling is the feeling that I liked every night. Now, let's say that I was up for 18 hours. Like, I might feel that for like the last 10 minutes of the day, but I felt way better. And over time, I started to be like, I'm really fulfilled and I feel kind of happy. But I stopped like looking for the happiness component. And I think for me, it was a different type of, oh, this is kind of a cool life. So let me just explore this as long as possible. And at the very least, if it's a 1 month run, and that's how I look at it. To me, it is at this point, probably 6 to 7 year run. And that's how I look at it. I don't look at it like, this is going to be me for the rest of my life. It's like, no, this is like rent. I have to pay the rent every day for this life. And I think that also changed it. Whereas before it was like, these are fixed traits, they're not malleable. And that's just who I am. And now I'm like, nope, I can be whoever I want to be. And I choose to be this person and I have to work hard every day to maintain that. And yeah, I think that's something I didn't know. I was like, okay, well, once you're this person, then you've crossed over and you're always gonna be that person. But I was like disappointed the fact that like, oh, I gotta do it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so yeah.
Yeah. In chapter 2, you have a great quote from Jim Rohn, who was Tony Robbins' mentor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he says the value is not in accomplishing a goal, but what achieving a goal will make of you. And I think you really illustrated that point is yeah, writing this book was fucking hard, but the person that you became through the process was almost something you couldn't even imagine when you initially started. But month after month, you were just like, okay, like I'm feeling a sense of fulfillment. I'm feeling a sense of purpose. I'm feeling a sense of progress, and happiness is a byproduct of those.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, similar to you, similar to me, we kind of get stuck chasing happiness. But like when you're chasing happiness, if you're going after happiness, by default, it means you don't have it.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And I'm gonna see if I can articulate this quote, but I heard this once. It's like, you know, um, wanting something in of itself is a unpleasant experience, right? Not wanting something in of itself is a pleasant experience, right? And the more, and especially for me on social, like all I would do would be, damn, that person has all of it, right? Like they have a cool house and cool car and they're going on cool vacations, all that. I was like, dude, I am sitting here writing a book, pretending to be somebody that I'm not. That's absolutely not my life. And that, like, detaching from that happiness piece of just being like, I'm just going to focus on one thing. I'm going to be a better human. And I believe in being a better human that all of these really good things will come. Like, I think that's the gateway to being there. And unfortunately, every day it requires the work to be a better human. Like, I really wish, and even till today, I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I wish I could just like lay it on me, right? Like, I've done a good job. Can I just like let it coast for a little bit? And it's like, no, man. Like every day, every moment, every interaction, I think that mindfulness is tough. But again, I think getting used to it is just the same way you got used to who you were before. You can get used to who you are today.
Yeah. So one of the parts of the book that I think was really powerful for me that's related to what we're talking about is kind of the difference between aiming high and missing versus aiming low and hitting. So like tell us a little bit more about that, because that's kind of related to what you just said. Like, can I just like aim a little bit lower and be okay with where I'm at?
Yeah. There was a super famous speech. If you look up, like, it's like, I love this guy. His name is like Rick Rigsby, right? And he talks about how his dad, who was like this, had only finished third grade, but really kind of made his own life, and had kids who were like judges and doctors and all that kind of stuff. And he taught them all kinds of life lessons. And one of them was like, I have no problem if you have a really big goal and you don't do it. He's like, I have a problem if you aim low and hit. And I think a lot of times, um, you know, when you have an easy button, people tend to press it because you're like, fuck it, why not? Let me just press it. It's easier. I can get to point B faster, right? And I think as an adult, especially as you become more successful in your career and you start to have these different major milestones in your life, like marriage and career, all that, you're like, I did the work. I did the hard work already. Why should I impart more difficulty on myself? That just doesn't make sense. That doesn't make me happy, right? But I think imparting the difficulty on yourself um, has so much value because you're forcibly putting yourself into a situation that causes something that's dormant inside of you to actually come out. And that can only come out when under duress. It can only come out when you're specifically in a challenge. And, that sounds like everybody wants what's on the other side of the challenge, but no one wants to go through the challenge. I don't want to go through the challenge, right? But getting used to saying, all right, and, it's so trite now at this point. Everyone says this: get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And it's almost like, it's overly said advice at this point, but it's so true. If you're willing to put yourself into a challenging situation, whether you achieve it or not is fully irrelevant. It's so irrelevant because now you're used to dealing with hard things, and this part of you, you unearth tools that you never had before. So I think that's why, like, that quote really resonated. But I think for most people can kind of get behind that and say, you're right. I totally just went for the low hanging fruit because it was just enough to be above average, but definitely not what I could be. And I think most people, certainly myself, it sucks when you could have done more but didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. You also quote, and this is talked about podcasts all the time, but Willink's quote, discipline equals freedom. And I think you've proven to yourself through the process of writing this book that, like, doing these hard things, like, it does bring that lasting sense of fulfillment that isn't, the fleeting happiness of, buying a new car or whatever the shiny toy of the moment is. And I think that's really powerful. And another quote you have that's kind of related to this that I thought was so powerful is, before every blessing comes a lesson. And, I think that was a Christian minister, TD Jakes, who said that. And I'm sure, like, through this journey of writing this book, of your career, of your marriage, of being a father, it's like you've achieved many blessings, but they've been, hard won through hard lessons.
Yeah, man. And it's so true that, again, everybody wants the lesson. And it sucks. It really does. It sucks to have to learn it, though. And especially, again, I think as you get older, it's almost dangerous. We're all really good at telling ourselves stories. So once you tell yourself a story like, well, I don't necessarily need to learn that lesson, or no, I'm good, I don't need to do that, we're really good at reinforcing that and finding all the details, which, there's tons of science behind this, right? The reticular activating system, where it talks about what you're looking for, you will absolutely find. What you're thinking about, you will find it. And if you're avoiding the difficult things, if you're avoiding the challenges, you create this impenetrable story that says, this is okay. This is okay not to do the difficult thing. This is okay to avoid all these things because I'm good. And then what we do is reinforce that with people and things and other stories around us that reinforce that, right? Because we're like, oh, I'll use working out for a second, or for example, right? It's like, oh, well, that's just them. They're really big fitness, people. So that's not us, right? And then you start to build this whole story, and it just becomes this castle that's impenetrable at some point. And when challenge comes, it doesn't even stand a chance, because you have such a fixed mindset on I don't need to change. But that's where all the growth is, man.
Yeah. Question for you. So earlier in this show, you kind of talked about, and you just like kind of briefly touched it and kind of like moved on. It was like, you've achieved the career, had the marriage, had the kids, had the house, had the car, but you still kind of felt empty. And that brings to mind that famous quote by Henry David Thoreau, that like men live lives of quiet desperation. And I feel like a lot of times, both men and women, when they get into their, mid 30s, 40s, they kind of like they've achieved these external things, but they still feel, lost or unfulfilled inside. And I'm just curious if you could share kind of, how you were able to fill that void, or what you would recommend to someone who's kind of, at the, edge of that chasm that they have to cross.
Yeah. There's a really important book in my journey that I mentioned in the book. It's called The Second Mountain. And it essentially talks about, the first part of your life, especially when you're thriving in your career, you're starting a family, all that. They call this the first mountain, and it's all surrounding hyper individualism. It's like, I want to do this. Here's what I want to do, da da da. And then you reach the top of this mountain. And then what happens is you fall all the way down. It's like this valley of despair. Because now that you got it, you realize, like, oh, well, I got this, all this stuff, or I got, all these things that I'm supposed to do by all social standards. And it's not nearly as fulfilling as I thought it was going to be. And then you fall down, and actually the climb to the second mountain, where it is outwardly focused, is the one that really brings long-term fulfillment. And for me, it's so crazy, because it's almost like, we've all drank this Kool-Aid. We did all the things, check all the boxes, and you're out having a cocktail at night, and you're like, this is cool, right? This is what we're supposed to be doing, right, right, right. And everyone's like, totally, man, we're gonna do this for the next 25, 30 years, right? And I don't know what's scarier, man, like knowing exactly what's gonna happen, or not knowing at all what the future is gonna hold. And I think that anybody in that state, I think I would encourage anybody to just be like, you know what? Because it's running perfectly, the best thing you can do is take the biggest wrench you could find and drop it in your life. You know what I mean? Like, it's the best thing possible, because, I think about how much I loved school growing up. Maybe not like the academic part, but I loved hanging out with my friends, seeing my friends every day. And part of why I look back, I was like, man, I love school. I loved high school. I loved college. I had such a blast. Why was that? And it was because you're constantly in change. You're constantly learning new things, and you don't have a choice. You're just, all right, now I'm going from a freshman to a sophomore to a junior to a senior. You don't have like, let me take a year off and really think about if I should do this whole like high school thing. Like you're just plopped right into it, and you're constantly uncomfortable, and you learn and you grow, and every year you're like, man, this is great. There's always something new. And then when we reach that pinnacle, you're like, I don't have to learn more. I don't need to challenge myself more. I've achieved it. And I think right at that moment is when, again, you got to drop the wrench in there and be like, fuck it. I need to go learn and do something bigger and better. And it's not just about success. Because I always, people think like, oh, well, you're money driven. That's all you want to do. And I'm like, no, like I get immense fulfillment from achievement. I get immense fulfillment from knowing what I'm capable of and actually doing that.
Yeah. So I think this is a perfect segue into something that I wanted to talk about, is when you get to that point where you've made it in your career, you got the, the family life that you wanted, got the house, you got the car. I think deep down, everyone kind of wants to do their own thing. Maybe not everybody. Some people are like happy being in a career that is personally fulfilling for them, where, they work on, in a company where they feel alignment with the vision of the company. But I know there's a huge subset of people who dream of starting their own thing. So tell us some words of wisdom or some advice. Like, how can someone, you know, start their own thing, figure out what their own thing could be, because a lot of, people with an entrepreneurial spirit listen to this show. And I think hearing from you on kind of like how one would go about starting their own thing could be really valuable.
Yeah. I was super lucky in how doing anything outside of a full time job started for me. It was COVID. Everybody was getting fired left and right. And, executives that were working at the company we were both at, went on to new places. And they were like, hey, remember that thing that you did for us here? Can you do that here? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't have any of my resources. What the hell do I have? Right. I was like, I don't have a team. Right. And they were like, no worries. You start Monday. And that's exactly how it started. And what I learned, though, is that everybody, certainly if you've been in the career or the workforce 5 years, let alone 10 years, or if you're our age, maybe 15, 20 years, right? You have a huge, huge skill set. And this opened my eyes because, if you're in a full-time job, they're going to ask you to do 10 things, right? But if you work as an entrepreneur, they'll pay you to just do one thing really well. They're like, and I'll actually pay you, 80% of what you were making before just to do this one thing. I was like, that's not possible, right? And I was like, maybe that's just because the person I'm talking to likes me and they gave me an opportunity. But the more I started to realize many people have built up a plethora of skills that were just so used to giving as a, one all in extra value meal to employers. You don't realize how valuable those skills are in isolation. And I think it's actually good to really have somebody other than you be like, hey, if I had to work for you and you know the skills I have, what's the most important skill that you think that you'd pay for? Right. And you'd be surprised by the answer. Like, so I work in marketing, right? And, I was like, oh, I'm going to do branding for them. I'm going to do content strategy. I'm going to do da da da. And they were like, I just want you to run online ads. I'm like, no, but that's not my thing. Here's what I want you to do. Right. And, the marketplace will actually tell you. I think this is where it's kind of an eye-opening experience for a lot of people. They think that what they are going to go to market with is what they're going to go to market with. But the market speaks to you. The market says, that's okay. I don't like skills 2 through 10. I just want skill number 1. And you have to listen because I think that's such a relevant piece of it. You try and jam the square peg into a round hole and you're like, I'm good at this. I'm going to force the world to accept it. Whereas you're good at all these things and you just go to the world and say, who wants it? Who wants some of this? And then be open for the feedback when someone's like, I really don't want all those, but I'll definitely take this. Because it tells you that there's a need for it. The market is telling you that I might represent one business, but I'm one of many businesses that look and smell like mine. Therefore, there's many other clients that you could potentially work with. And what I started to realize is, okay, this one skill is very valuable in the marketplace. How can I build more stickiness around that skill? And that in and of itself requires you to learn more skills. And so I think it's first about knowing what you think you're actually good at. And then after that, going out to market and seeing if people actually want that skill. And then critically being open to what the market says that the value do bring. And then from there, being open to growing that skill set. Right? Because so many of us are like, all right, well, I'm really good at this one thing. That is me. That's what I identify with. And kind of going back to like how you can reinvent yourself. It's like, well, you're good at a lot of things. And this one thing you do shows a lot of promise. You should double, triple, quadruple down on that. And I think that if you're willing to do that and actually, shed the skin of who you were, you're going to find that not only can you build all those skills again, you can build it in ways that people are willing to pay you thousands of dollars for.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's several things that are really powerful for the audience to understand. So one of the books that was pivotal in my own career development was Be So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport.
Yeah.
And it really talks about developing career capital and like just getting so good at certain skills that like people can't help but pay you tons of money. And I personally think that a 9 to 5 job, even if you hate it, you should love it because they are literally paying you to develop your skills.
Exactly, man.
And it's like, instead of paying to go to school, school is paying you to learn and grow and become better. And so as you're speaking, I was kind of thinking about my own journey. So kind of the thing that came to me is like, you take your 9 to 5 skill set, you combine it with your interests and passions, as well as combining it with the skills that you built outside of work. So in my own case, when COVID hit, similar to, what Gary mentioned earlier, I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know if this company is going to make it. I better start thinking of like what I could do next. And, when COVID hit, like, I've been in enterprise sales for 10 years. Like, all my meetings went to, virtual meetings. So I had to learn how to sell and present and perform on camera in front of other people. And then also for, 2 or 3 years leading up to the pandemic, I was hosting a monthly financial independence money meetup with anyone who was interested in financial independence. And then when COVID hit, we took it virtual. So we literally had like 30 to 50 people getting online once a month to talk about financial independence and money. And then I was also, I've had a lifelong, passion for fitness. And so what I came up with is like, I should do a fitness and money online coaching business. And like, I've learned how to present in front of a camera, in front of a group of people. I've learned how to, win clients over video. And I'm deeply interested in money, personal finance, financial independence, and fitness. And so I can combine all those skills, creating a skill stack that I can then take to the marketplace and see if the marketplace will like pay me for it. And lo and behold, like it did. I hit 6 figures my first year online coaching. And I just, some people may have heard that story before. I can't remember if I talked about it on the podcast, but like all those skills I built at work and through my outside of work extracurricular interests and passions. And like, no matter what you're doing for your 9 to 5, you're building up a really valuable skill set. And if you're a person who's interested in personal development, growth, self-improvement, you are also building up skill sets outside of work. And then at some point in your life, when you come to that, you have to cross the chasm of like, okay, I've kind of made it in my career. I've made it with the house and the family. Like, now I want to do something that's more fulfilling. You can use that framework to then, climb that second mountain where you're actually really aligning what you're good at with how you want to serve other people in a way that is deeply connected to your personal interests and passions.
I love that, man. One of the things I think also about, that skill stack that you were talking about was don't be afraid to learn new skills on top of all that. And I think part of the entrepreneurship piece is somebody saying, are you good at this? And I would literally just be like, yes, I'll do it. And not actually knowing that skill set yet. And
Yeah.
at first I was like, oh, is this like bad practice? But what that does is it forces you to learn at an exponential rate because now there's something real at stake, right? Like if I was like, hey, Justin, I need you to do this. And you're like, well, I kind of know a little bit about this. Like, great, I'll pay you $10,000, have it ready by next month. Now you have full reason to immerse yourself in it. And I think what's good about that is that, if I just said, Justin, it's really good to learn skill X and Y. And you're like, yeah, okay, I'll learn it. Versus you're going to get paid $10,000 end of this month and you got to give me what the outcome is of skill X and Y. You're going to learn about it rapidly. And that's also something I write about in the book, Ultra Learning, where you kind of deep dive and you fully immerse yourself in something. But that's also circumstantial. You have to put yourself in the environment and circumstance and give yourself the parameters that allow you to say, I have to win at this. I have to learn this skill. And now you have that on top of the skills that you already have. And now you just start to become super, super valuable to the marketplace. And I think for any entrepreneur looking to start their own business or become a consultant or anything like that, That's what it is. It's like you are valuable to the marketplace because you have all these skills. And the beauty of it is they don't have to pay you or hire you immediately on 100% of your skills. They can hire you on 40% of your skills,
Yeah.
and you can make up for the other 60 by just accepting the work. And that allows you to learn new skills. And yes, it's difficult, but you compound that over time, and your growth trajectory for how valuable you are to the market is insane.
Yeah. And this is like, you bring me to a point that I think is so critical. Most people, like, they get into, and like, I apologize for the vulgar phrase I'm going to use, is like never ending learning, which is kind of like mental masturbation. It feels good, but it doesn't accomplish anything. And I think what is much more powerful is to learn by doing, which is exactly what Gary just was speaking about. Is like, these clients would be like, hey, can you do X? And he's like, inside he's like, no idea, but outside he's like, yeah, no, not a problem. And then he like has a forcing function that forces him to go learn it. And that's, I think, one of the most powerful things to understand when you're building your side hustle, or whatever, is like the best way to build it is by building it, because as you're building, you're going to run into a problem or something you don't know, and then you can go seek out specific knowledge to solve that problem. And then as soon as you get that knowledge, you go back, apply that knowledge, get through that problem, or breakdown in your business building, and then you keep building until you run into that next problem, where you then go seek out specific information in order to like overcome the next problem. And it's this iterative process of like, learn by doing, and then when you run into a problem, go get that specific knowledge to solve that problem, and then go do more learning by doing. And you just keep doing this and doing this and doing this. But a lot of people will spend 10 years reading about X, Y, and Z, but it feels good. Learning feels so good. Like, I love learning. I could read books all day and listen podcasts and listen to Tony Robbins, but it's like, at the end of the day, if I'm not doing anything with that knowledge, it's only potential power. Knowledge put into action is true power.
Yeah, man. And what I like about what you just said is that it becomes this iterative loop. And when you start to, at least for me, what I started to find out was, as I started to be open, okay, I'm now learning a new skill set. This is super tough. I don't know shit about it. And I'm starting to learn it, but I'm gaining competency. Now I'm accepting something else, another skill set that I signed up for, and another and another. And all of a sudden, now, let's say what the average person might learn one skill over the course of a year, I've got 3 or 4 skills happening at the same time. I can learn at an exponential rate. What would take them a year will only take me 3 months. And being that tuned up is so valuable for the marketplace, because
Yeah.
people will pay you extreme amounts of money to solve their problems. And when they know that you're competent, that's what they're looking for, right? Like, bosses we work for, they're always like, I trust you enough because I believe you can solve my problem. Cool, I got it. And I think that, and it's risky, it's scary, but again, what pops out on the other side is it's amazing, because that, again, what's dormant inside, your ability to learn, grow, use in the real world, it's only tapped into when you put yourself in that situation.
Yeah. I love it. I think this is a good segue. So one of the things that you and I share is kind of this passion for fitness. And, I know you've competed in Olympic weightlifting. So tell us a little bit about that journey, and kind of like some of the fundamental, either skills or mindsets that you've developed, in your fitness, that you've applied to your business and to your work.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting, because I think a lot of folks are saying, I just want to become fit, or I just want to become rich, or I just want to grow my career. And it's like, actually, they all kind of happen in parallel, right? So as I was doing all this with the work and the book and all that, you have to have a tuned up body. Like, if I'm going to be up for 18 to 20 hours, I can't be eating potato chips and Snickers bars all day, right? Like, you have to have like an actual tuned up body. And so for me, I was into CrossFit and ultimately, Olympic weightlifting, but the mindset there carries you over. So at some point when I'm really kind of like, oh, fuck this, I don't want to do work anymore, I don't want to, write the book anymore, I'm just like, I'm over it, I'm burned out. you can actually gain energy from another bucket because you're doing the same thing in parallel somewhere else. And that was fitness. And fitness being a perfect parallel because it was, if I'm doing Olympic lifting and I have to do like, 345, 350 pound squats for doubles, you're just like, dude, this sucks. And I'm so weak and my back hurts and my knees hurt and my knees are crackling. And I'm signed up for a meet that takes place 6 weeks or 2 months into the future. Like there's no getting out of it. And that forces you to say, man, if I give up here, I'm not going to be able to hit my numbers. I'm not going to be able to compete well for the meet. And if I give up here, deep down inside, I know it's going to give me just enough of a chink in the armor to give up somewhere else, maybe in my personal life, maybe in learning a new skill set, anything like that. And I think it's so important for people to say, it's not that I don't want to do the squats. It's not that I don't want to do the heavy lifting so I can become a better lifter. It's I have to do this as well because it keeps the story in line. Like if I'm a good husband, if I'm doing all these different things, this is another component that holds it all up. Like these are pillars that hold up the larger vision for what I want my life to be. And fitness for me really was that outlet. And then, I think an effect of that was like, oh, cool, like you ended up becoming real fit. But I think on the fitness piece too, and I'll use you as an example, like I would ask you all the time, I'd be like, hey, can you tell me what your body fat is? Right? And you were like 10%. I was like, no way. I'm like, prove it. You send me selfies. I'd be like, oh, I'm definitely not sending you a selfie. Right? And I was like, how is that possible? And you're like, it just is. It's just consistency. I wake up and this is who I am. The same way I eat breakfast every day. This is just kind of what I do. And I think in the fitness world or in anyone's fitness journey, it's good to have someone like that to aspire to. It's good to have someone like that because inevitably you're working out by yourself, or even if you're in a group setting, it's still you doing the work. So having somebody that is also doing it makes it so much easier to get through it. And that's at least what worked for me. Some people might say, hey, it should be driven from within. But for me, I was like, I like knowing that if I'm doing something difficult in the fitness space and I don't want to do it, there's some other crazy person doing the same thing. And I know that they're not stopping. So let me continue this. And same thing, I always get proud. And I think the other of it is if I'm able to give myself a challenge, same thing, just like you're accepting a job in a consultancy or accepting a new position at work or anything like that, putting yourself out there to have to compete in something, whether it's, it could be a Tough Mudder or it could be a competition, or even just like a 5K, that makes it real because there's no getting out of it. Like that point in time is going to happen. Whether or not you want it to, like that time will pass. And I think being able to say, I can't get out of it, same thing, pull something out of you that causes you to rise to the occasion.
100%. Yeah. Some of the best times of my life are, when I had some sort of physical event to prepare for, and that's come in the form of, doing Spartan obstacle course races, doing, 100-mile bike rides, doing like things like Vision Quest where I'm like fasting in nature for 96 hours. It's like when you go do those hard physical things, then when it comes to the hard things in, the other parts of your life and work, you're like, oh, this is like not as hard as like the physical thing I, am doing or have to do. And a lot of that translates. And, I think another, powerful aspect to me, kind of in my own fitness journey was working with a coach and just having somebody who, supported the goal that I wanted to achieve and helped me get there 10 to 100 times faster than I could get there on my own. And then just having the accountability that, I've invested my money, AKA I have skin in the game. So like, I'm not going to like not do what my coach tells me to do because I'm literally like paying him or her to like hold me accountable. Like, I'm not going to show up to a one-on-one meeting and be like, yeah, everything we talked about last meeting, I didn't do, like, because like there's, I don't know, there's something about having skin in the game that really changes things. And you can create that skin in the game by like signing up for a competition, by having a coach, or some sort of event that you have to prepare for. And I think that's super, super powerful.
Yeah. And you're so right, man. It makes regular life way easier because you're like, I just did some pretty hard stuff this morning. And
Yeah.
you're like, man, everything is like, this is great. I can take on anything. And it's a different type of empowerment because it's proof. It's proof. It's not just in your head. Like you actually physically did something difficult. And let's say you're also, doing knowledge work that's also difficult. You're like, man, I'm doing all kinds of things that are self-imposed. So when life throws something at me, I'm like, I'm not going to say I'm fully ready, but I'm definitely more ready than I would be hadn't I done anything.
Yeah. So, kind of the last topic that I want to briefly cover before we land this plane is, you know, your journey to becoming, a great husband and father. So, any insight or stories that you want to share that would kind of, help someone else who's trying to be a great husband or a great father. What are some of the things that you would share?
Yeah, I read a book once that was recommended to me. It was the 80/80. I think it's called the 80/80 marriage, right? And essentially, what it talks about is, everyone's always like, "Well, you're married now, so it's split right down the middle." And like that's not the case. And I always used to think like, well, if I did the dishes today, it's Monday. You got to do it Tuesday. And you start thinking that you're like, well, now I'm in this marriage, and I got in this marriage because now I can have all the responsibilities of my life. And that's not the case. And I think for me, the more I started to have a checklist of all the stuff that I did and contributed and then weighted it against what my wife did, the more toxic I became because all I started to do was notice everything I was doing and she wasn't. But that's also flawed because that's also my perception of what is good or what is reasonable or what she should be doing. And to me, that almost cost me my marriage because I was so resentful. Like I couldn't go a day without being like, "Oh man, she didn't do this for me," And it's just again, it's like a little bit of something creates a cancer. And so, what I do now, and I always tell people is, I think I have the best point in our marriage we've ever had because now I expect nothing from her. I just do everything that I can. So I think about it, it sounds kind of terrible, but like, God forbid, if something was to happen to her and it was just me, would I care if I was a single dad, if I had to do laundry, if I had to go grocery shopping, if I had to take care of the kids, if I had to do all that stuff, would I even care? And no, I'd be like, no, I would just do it. Right. But the perception of like, well, there's a spouse next to me, so we better have this thing, I think changes everything. And what I do now is just say, my goal is to be the best man possible. And the best man I know by my standards, he does dishes, he takes out the trash, he's a mindful husband, he does all these things. And an effect of me being a really good man, I end up being a really good husband. I end up really being a really good brother and son and father. But that has to come from within. So it can't ever be like, and it's such a terrible phrase, happy wife, happy life. It's a terrible phrase, right? But because it's like, oh, well, if my wife's happy, and I used to do that. I used to associate her happiness with my self-worth. And once you, I think, detach from that and just say, I am going to do the very best I can. I'm going to put everything into the here. And I'm going to trust you, spouse, to do the same. And your level of 100% might look very different than my level of 100%. And I'm okay with that. I'm just going to keep giving. And that for me has been, such a blessing in terms of how healthy that makes a marriage. Because you're not resentful. You're not like, having these thoughts of what they're not doing. It's just more so, well, this is great. I'm just contributing. So whatever she brings to the table, I'm like, oh, that's more than nothing. And it's not saying there's like no bar, right? It's very different than saying like there's zero expectation and she doesn't have to do anything. It's more so I'm not casting my expectations on who she should be onto her.
Yeah, I love that. So I think that there is an incredible amount of wisdom in your book. And before we tell people, where the best place to get it, I always like to ask every guest to share a tip, tool, or strategy, one for fitness and or health, one for money and or wealth, and one for life and or happiness. So what do you got for us, Gary?
That's a good one, man. Fitness, I think be like, really have an honest conversation with yourself, what you're looking at doing. Is it because you want to just be shredded and have a six pack? Is it because you don't want to die because you have like high blood pressure? Like, really find out your why behind why fitness is a priority in life. And I say that because it has to be a priority. But I think that once you figure out what you're looking for, and I think this is where people get lost. They end up having these crazy expectations. Like, I want to be shredded and I want to walk around like one of these people in a bodybuilding show. But you're like, you don't realize that like they're prepping for that. That's a whole lifestyle. And you want to walk around like that on a Tuesday afternoon? Like, get real, right? But if you're like, I just want to have good, healthy biometrics, that's good. Then be okay with what you want in your fitness journey and don't let anybody influence that. And then I think the other part of that is making it routine. Like, just like having breakfast, like, I don't want to work out. And the reality is the vast majority of the time, you're probably not going to. Just saying, this is going to be routine. I'm going to make it part of my daily habits. And now it becomes just part of your lifestyle. Certainly for the fitness piece. I think for the finance piece is constantly learn so you can add more value. People always pay for value, and getting that value is tough because you're fitting that in with the busy schedule of other things that you have to do, right? But if you impart the difficult task of learning something, you will reap the rewards for that forever. Like, once you learn it, you know it. So it's only really a point in time where you're doing the difficult work of learning new skills, but it always pays off exponentially. And stacking that, compounding that over months, years, you just become extremely valuable to the marketplace.
Yeah.
And
I would add one piece to that. I just did a post on Threads the other day about this. The two most important skills to becoming rich are, number one, becoming a perpetual learner, and number two, becoming a consistent action taker. When you combine those two skill sets together, like, you can't help but become very wealthy.
yeah, that's sound advice, man. Absolutely. What was the third one again? I forgot.
Life or happiness.
Got it. The same thing, man. I would detach from trying to chase happiness because it is, uh, there's nothing wrong with feeling all the emotions all the time. And I think I was certainly one of those who was like, damn it, I got this anger on me, get it off me. I got sadness on me, get it off me. But really, it's happiness comes and goes just like all the other emotions. And I think that once you detach from the happiness and just say, look, it's okay, it comes in spurts, and that's okay. I don't have to be happy all the time, the same way I don't have to have cheeseburgers or candy all the time, right? Like, it's okay if it comes sporadically, and I accept the fact that a lot of times I'm not going to be happy. A lot of times I'm going to be sad or angry or frustrated, and that's okay. And just knowing that everything is cyclical, like, it's going to come and go, and I think that's fine. And people, I think, are too damn hard on being like, man, it's Saturday morning, I should be happy. And it's like, when you start putting those crazy expectations on yourself, you start looking at lens through this lens of lack, and it's terrible. So I think that is a really important piece that ultimately drives, I think, really strong gratitude.
I love it. So, Gary Batara, author of Lessons to Inspire Practical Advice from Successful People. For people who want to get the book, it's available on Amazon. If people want to connect with you online, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because I'm not active on social. I haven't been on social for a number of years, but you just email me. First name, last name, 72 at Gmail. And the book is, I actually have it right here. This book, it's available at, Barnes and Nobles, Target. If you're in the East Bay, San Ramon area, it's available at the Dublin stores physically. But yeah, Barnes and Nobles, Target, Walmart, actually all kinds of weird places I've never heard of that actually sell like books retail. It's on Apple Books, and it also comes in ebook form as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So that was Gary Batara72 at gmail.com. If you want to email him, Gary, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show, brother. And, I think the most incredible part about your book for me was just understanding your journey of becoming the husband, father, brother, son, colleague, and friend that you always aspired to be. So thank you for writing the book, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Justin, man, it's my pleasure. And thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunity.